the legend. Shinji Mikami is one of the greatest video game designers of all time. He's widely known as the Big Papa of survival horror for directing a spooky little game you might have heard of called Biohazard. But over here we call it Evil Resident. The other day, I was looking through Mikami's previous work and found that he has a pretty diverse catalog of games that expand past the survival horror genre, games I played as a kid not knowing Mikami was responsible for creating. So I decided to go down memory lane. I pulled out the old 8MB PS2 memory card, revisited all of Shinji Mikami's directed work, and made a ranking on it from worst to best. A friendly reminder that this is just my own opinion, and this is just my dumb list that you probably don't care about. Originally planned to be a war game referred to as Robot War Game, Mikami a few days into development said, nah, this game's sucky. Let's call it Jaguar. No, scratch that. Let's call it PN3 and make it a third-person action game. The whole goal behind PN3 was to make it fun to watch and fun to play. Mikami tried achieving this goal by making speed, visuals, and action the key elements in creating an intense experience. Mikami had a vision for this game, but because of a lackluster development and lack of resources, his vision couldn't fully come to life. PN3 had a lot of flaws. The story was non-existent, the controls were janky, the level design didn't seem that inspiring, and gameplay got pretty repetitive. This project felt more like a concept rather than an actual game. A concept with ideas that Mikami would eventually incorporate into a title of his 7 years later. Dude, just imagine Resident Evil, but with dinosaurs. Because that's exactly what Dino Crisis is. Developed a few years after the release of Resident Evil, Mikami wanted to step away from the fictional monsters, and he had the bright idea of bringing in big lizard boys instead. The story for this is simple and straightforward. You're trapped on an island, investigating a research facility with a bunch of dinosaurs in it. It's like the final segment of any Resident Evil game when you're stuck in a lab and the monsters in there get more hectic and tensions are crazy and you're panicking, except in Dino Crisis is like this for the entire fucking game with aggressive raptors instead of lickers. And my god was this game awesome to play as a kid. I mean, I get being chased around by raptors and shit was scary, but I still found it to be a really fun experience. I'm hoping one day this game gets remade. Now this is one of those games I didn't know Mikami had directed until recently. When this game first released, going into it I was skeptical. Cover-based shooting games were never my cup of tea, and at the time Vanquish was marketed to be just any other. But upon first playing it, I couldn't believe what I was experiencing. Remember when I said that PN3 had ideas that Mikami would eventually use? Yeah, those ideas come out balls first, sliding right into your face in Vanquish. The gameplay is aggressive, fast, and chaotic. Mikami basically accomplished what they originally had planned to do in PN3, and that was making a game which is fun to watch and fun to play. However, it seems like all the budget went into the gameplay because the story and characters were really unmemorable. But in 2010, at the end of the day, coming home after a day at school just wanting to turn my brain off to some mindless fun, Vanquish was the perfect game for that. After Mikami dropped Vanquish, he made his grand return to survival horror 4 years later with The Evil Within. Not only was this game his return to the genre, it was also the last game he stated he'd ever direct. This only skyrocketed my anticipation to see what Mikami was gonna go out with. I remember watching the teaser trailer for this when it first came out and it scared me out of my pajamas. I mean, the vibe of it all felt disturbing. The monsters were unique and creepy and everything just felt gross. I was terrified and excited for what crazy shit Mikami had up his sleeve. I waited patiently, I copped it, I played it, and it was pretty good. The story was ambitious, going more towards psychological horror, which ended up being pretty convoluted, but nonetheless, I fucked with it. The gameplay didn't really offer anything new. The level designs and atmosphere were damn spooky. Some monster designs were genuinely unique. The characters were fine. Sebastian, the protagonist, was aight. I didn't really vibe with him, but he was aight. And oh my god, that aspect ratio, like you should have added a function to turn it off on launch because the TV I was playing on was already small as hell, come on now. Overall, The Evil Within is a true survival horror game crafted by the master of its genre. It sure as hell also added to the experience knowing that this could possibly be the last game I'd play from the mind of Mikami. The year is 2006. Capcom USA released Final Fight Streetwise, the latest beat-em-up game in a franchise that Shinji Mikami genuinely loved. After Mikami played this new installment that Capcom USA had developed, he thought it was absolute dog shit, and was pissed that a series he enjoyed had ended up like this. So he thought to himself, fuck it dude, I could make a beat-em-up game, and God Hand was born. Now, the development of God Hand has some pretty alpha lore that I just can't not bring up. Mikami the year prior had just delivered Capcom a behemoth of a game, so in his eyes he felt like he could do anything. He didn't give a shit what anyone had to say. He wanted to make a game that he would enjoy. This absolute Chad knew day one that this game he was about to make wouldn't sell copies, and not that many people would like it. But he made it anyways because he could, and because he had the passion in creating something he always wanted to create. Unfortunately, Mikami's assumptions were right. The game didn't sell well and was poorly received on launch, but as the time went on, God Hand would eventually become a cult classic and become a beloved game to many, like myself, because to me, God Hand was it. Looking back, my memories of playing it feels like a fever dream. This was probably my first introduction into full Japanese horror being put into a game, and I couldn't have been more confused, aroused, and confused. But I can't say I didn't like it. The story was simple, but it wasn't bland. The cast of characters were diverse, interesting, and some were surprisingly progressive. God Hand was way ahead of its time, man. The combat system being the highlight of it all. Besides Olivia, combat was crazy in this game, and super in-depth. Like, out of the dozens of moves to choose from, you can assign any of them to each face button. The left analog movement is a little wonky, but you get used to that quickly. And the right analog allows you to dash, do backflips, or control your upper body movement to sway any attacks. It was sick. And once you're warm with the controls, and you go out there and you go punch a guy to the moon, you kick some nuts, you kick some ass sometimes, spank some ass, get your ass kicked. It's about drive, it's about power, and you go press L1 in the menu and see photos of Olivia and then you make sure no one is home, man. The OG, the pioneer of the survival horror genre. Pay your respects to the old head and bless your Lolo. This fossil of a giant was before my time, so I never really got the chance to experience it on the PS1, but I did play Deadly Silence when it came out on the DS, which is basically the OG, just slightly better. When I booted that up for the very first time, you know what was the scariest thing about Resident Evil for me? It wasn't the opening cutscene, the dogs, it wasn't the big spooky mansion, it wasn't dialogue either. It was the tank controls that I could barely handle as a kid. Once I managed to figure it out and make it to the first zombie, then that's when the actual scariest Resident Evil moment happened. When those pupils locked eyes with me, I was no longer a boy. That one moment set the tone for the rest of the games, and I had my eyes on the franchise from that day on. RE96 is a classy chap. It's by no means a perfect game, flaws mostly due to limitations in hardware, but still a classic that defined an entire genre. But what would this game be if Capcom didn't have those hardware limitations? Without hardware limitations, Mikami and the team at Capcom were free to create their original vision for Resident Evil, and my god almighty boy is this game timeless. 20 years later and this is still stunning to look at, and it still holds up today without flaw. The story, the setting, characters and monsters is just timeless. The team took everything that was great about the original and pimped that ride in a tasteful way. You had your photorealistic pre-rendered backgrounds, beautiful in-game models that blended well with the environment, the dialogue which was still cheesy but this time in a charmful way. Tank controls were now optional. There were also new enemies with the bonus addition of some sassy girls sprinkled in. You have your perfect package, and you have your purest Resident Evil game ever made. Honestly, I wouldn't even be upset if Capcom decides to cash in and make another remake of this, but in a different camera perspective this time. Maybe third person, first person, all the persons. I just want to experience the mansion in every form possible. Anyways, this game is fucking great. Go play it if you haven't, dude. Before becoming what it is today, Resident Evil 4 had 4 previous versions of it which were directed by different people that were all eventually scrapped. The team at Capcom just didn't know where to go with Resident Evil 4. Besides development hell, the franchise itself was slowly falling apart after criticism of the series becoming too formulaic. Fans and even some developers themselves started to grow bored of the games. This put Capcom in a tough spot: reinvent or watch Resident Evil slowly die off. That was until off the top rope, Shinji Mikami elbow dropped on Capcom's dome and said I'll do it myself. And the team at Capcom with Mikami contributing as director brought home one of the greatest, most revolutionary games of all time. It's my favorite game of all time. It's your favorite game of all time. It's your uncle's favorite game of all time. It's Resident Evil 4, man. What else can I say that hasn't already been said? So this was my list of Shinji Mikami's directed titles. I can't describe how much I appreciate this lad and the team at Capcom for putting in the work to create some of the greatest games I've ever played in my life. Although Mikami claimed that he's retiring from directing, in 2020 he stated that he would consider coming back only if he were to have full creative control. So I really do hope that this man comes back to create something special. A Resident Evil game, a new IP, or I don't know, God Hand 2. If you somehow made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Comment below if you got a list of your favorite Shinji Mikami games. I'd love to know about it.